are talking today to Nora Bossong from Germany. Hi, Nora.
Hi.
Some people are born as writers, but they may never become one eventually, and others work hard to be a writer, but still do not succeed. Tell us please about your path towards becoming a writer, and when did you first call yourself a writer?
Well, actually, I called myself a writer when every other option to gain money didn't develop as I had thought. So actually, it goes back to my childhood. I always wanted to become a writer. I've always been writing, actually, since I am able to write, to invent stories. But really, to call myself a writer, I was kind of scared to do that. I think that I don't know. Maybe you stop working on yourself if you're too safe with your wishes and what you want to become. So actually, I waited a long time till I called myself really a writer from profession.
What were other options, I wonder?
Well, actually, I wanted to work somewhere else, not in Germany. I thought about becoming a diplomat or working for the Goethe Institute. What I do right now, I mean, I work with the Goethe Institute quite often, but from the other side, I thought to work in an institute somewhere in Europe probably, but maybe also somewhere else. But I was always fascinated to live somewhere else, not a normal German life.
Now I see the topics of your books are covering this part of your work. So my next question is like two short questions I want you to answer. How is it to be a writer, and how is it to be a woman writer? Is there a difference for you?
Well, yes, of course. I think that it changes at the moment, or for years, but it changes very slowly. And to be a writer, that is fascinating, fabulous. You can invent your own world, your utopia or your dystopia, whatever you're interested in. And to be a woman writer, I think that you still have to fight some prejudices, as they are that women can write about emotions, but not about politics, not about intellectual things. And you still have to fight this idea that people have that, like this cute writer who writes about love stories. And I think that the third novel came out, and I was still asked why I'm not focusing on love stories. I wrote about like the Nazi regime. I wrote about a company, a family company. I wrote about different topics. And there were love stories in these novels, but they didn't play the main role. And I was very surprised that I think no male writer would have been asked the same question, why he does not write love stories.
Yes, that's true. And who are your tutors? Are those male writers or female writers?
Both, and I think there are becoming more and more women who are in the position of being a tutor. Right now, I'm mentoring a young writer, a female writer, and I'm very happy to do that. But like the generation of my parents, or even, of my grandparents, there were a lot of male writers and not so many. I mean, for Germany, I can say Ilse Aichinger, Ingeborg Bachmann, who is Austrian, but who wrote in German. There are like few female writers. And if I look at the literary circle right now and, look at the women who are 30 years older than me, there are some, and they're getting stronger, and they're seen right now, but that was a hard way to get there. And so I had tutors of course, male tutors, because they were the people the men who are leading the publishing houses, who can decide things. And well, actually, I know like 3 or 4 women who have the same position. It changes, but it's incredibly slow.
We hear in the smaller countries, in the newly independent countries after, Soviet Union, ex-Soviet countries, we think that the problem is huge here, but apparently we do not know enough about Europe, about these problems in Europe. And as far as I can understand from conversation with you, it's the same everywhere. And this, I don't want to go deep into the feminist topic, but it was first the fight for the rights of women, now it's the fight for the equal rights, and they are very different, right?
Yeah, and that's true. And I mean, if you look at the history, for example, the French Revolution, there was Olympe de Gouges who wrote the Declaration of Female Rights, because she already then saw that with the Menschenrechte, with human rights, there were only men who have been seen in these days. And there were a lot of people who were against her, and not only men, but also women, because like the stereotypes were very, very strong. And women had to be mothers, had to be housewives. And of course, I mean, that's a long time ago, but still I think that we kind of have nuances of these fights, and they're not at an end at the moment. They're still going on. There are progresses, but well, we're still fighting.
You are known for both being a poet and a fiction writer, right? And usually everybody starts writing as a kid and starts with poetry, a poetry piece. And unless they later become poets, they usually turn to fiction and become fiction writers. But you combined it both, and you have like 2 poetry books and 3 fiction, or 4 now, right?
4 already.
Yes, already 4. Which of these 2 is still like your favorite genre, if any of this? And where do you feel yourself more convenient?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, for me, poetry and prose are combined. For my novels, like, the language is very, very important, and it's like another protagonist. I mean, I have the protagonists who have names, like Mira and Milan in the last novel, but the language is so important for me, and I think I couldn't write prose if I would not at least read a lot of poetry. But I think writing poetry helps a lot. And on the other side, my poetry tells small stories. I think that is, I learned that from prose, from short stories, from fiction. So for me, I would never leave one of the 2. They belong together in some way, and I really love to read authors who write both poetry and prose, and I get bored quite easy if there's a fiction writer who does not use the language carefully.
We have seen some really famous writers, fiction writers whose poetry was published later, even after their death, and it was coming as a surprise to their readers. So it's not such a rare thing, actually, right? So your novel called 36.9, which is translated into English as Gramsci's Fall, is exploring the outstanding figure of Antonio Gramsci and touches upon the topics of personal and national importance. While being in love with the Russian young woman, Antonio is also supposed to fight for his ideas and save Italy from Mussolini's regime. So he spends almost 9 years of his life in prison and dies soon after he is getting released. I'm giving a little bit of context to the audience. But then he spends the years that he spends in prison, he uses to still continue fighting for his ideas. He writes his famous notebooks, prison notebooks during those years. Fighting for our ideas, and what's the one idea that you are ready to fight for till the end of your life? Is there one or many, maybe?
Well, probably some idea about liberty, and for me, liberty or freedom is not just something that we get, but that we build. I mean, if we just, I would really fight for freedom and liberty and human rights in countries that do not really, give them to the people. But still, I think that in Germany, for example, or in Europe on the whole, we lose a way of using our liberty. At the moment, with Corona and with the pandemic situation, I mean, our liberty, of course, our freedom is has some, it's not at its best. But it's still, it's a pandemic, and here in Germany, not a lot, but some very loud people go on the streets and say that everything is back like in the days of Hanukkah before the wall came down. And a lot of people, it's easy to misunderstand the meaning of freedom nowadays, because we have so much of it, that when someone takes a little bit of it with reason, and I mean, pandemic is a reason, they go crazy, and they have some very strange ideas of history, or they see themselves in historic frames that don't really belong to these days we now have. So I probably would really fight for a good understanding of freedom and how to use it, and how to use it on behalf of other people. It's not just a thing that belongs to me, but it belongs to a society.
Yeah, that's true. Talking about pandemic, I was listening to your interview during the pandemic, sharing your experience, and though writing is a lonely profession, but you seem to miss being able to write sitting with the people in the cafes. Is it a lonely profession to you, or do you still need to communicate to people to be able to write?
Well, actually, yeah, it is a very lonely profession, and the cafe I was always writing, it was closed before the pandemic. It was probably bankrupt or something, and after that, I actually, for the first time, I felt how lonely writing is. Before that, I always had like people around me. I liked them. It was not like meeting a friend and just being together and be concentrated to the talks. But I was surrounded by people I really, really liked. And after that, so that was my lockdown half a year before the official lockdown came. I actually recognized that I need people. To be lonely, you need to know that there are people, otherwise you get lost, I think, or at least I would get lost.
Yeah, so returning to your work, your most recent novel, Rules of Engagement, is about a woman working in the UN. I already figured out where this interest towards the organization comes for you. And it is said that the novel is about reconsidering the values and the values she used to believe, right? So have you reconsidered the values since the pandemic started and it eventually hasn't ended yet? What kind of values are there to be reconsidered when we face this kind of, situation?
I think one is solidarity, and here in Germany we were talking a lot about solidarity. And in the beginning it was, you were nice to your neighbors, but the solidarity stopped at the border. And when Italy was in a really severe situation, it was not really possible to work together as the European Union. And that's the main task. And the solidarity, for example, I had a discussion with a friend. We're getting some money to help people who had COVID. And I was I thought that the camps in Moria and in Greece, where a lot of people live together in very terrible situations, that we could get help for them, or at least support Médecins Sans Frontières. And for him, that was out of Europe, so that was not our problem, although Greece is obviously part of Europe. And that was a moment where I saw, or I felt, that we talk so much about solidarity, but when it gets close to us and when we have to pay for it, then it's getting more and more difficult. So I think we have to really, be very sensitive with that, and to change our behavior, not only talking, but really doing something.
And we understand it only when the situation comes for us to understand, like the pandemic did. But let's return to your work again. So in the contemporary world, it seems like the truth is the most doubted thing, and people have lost trust towards information, international humanitarian organizations, which are like stepping away from their core values, right? That's what the character of the book comes to understand. And politics also seems to be, in modern world, politics seems to be, based on economic relations more than human relations, or principles of democracy, human rights, or, fair game for all. No, that obviously didn't work. So do you think that there is a distinct border between like good and bad in the world? And in your writing, do you uncover this in your novel, or at least for yourself?
Well, I think that what the difficult part is to be able to understand ambivalence. And I think, for example, or at the moment, a lot of people are frustrated. I can understand that. It's a tough year. It has been a tough year, and people are frustrated with democracy, with institutions, with their own welfare. And it's not only this year, but for example, the United Nations, they did a lot of huge mistakes, and there were people, and thousands, and in Rwanda maybe a million of people killed, and the United Nations was not able to cope with the situation and to stop the situation. So, and that's just like the very obvious failure of the United Nations. But still, there is something that the United Nations can do, and if we had a world without this organization, it might probably would be even worse. So it's not actually about good and bad, but to see and to understand the good part in the bad and the bad part in the good, and just to understand that there's not really a clear border or a border zone even in the middle, and here's the bad and here's the good, but it's mixed, and you cannot really separate these parts, and that's the difficult thing about it.
You touch a lot of topics connected with politics in your work. How important it is in your life, and how do you think literature can affect politics or affect masses better than the politics? What part of your life is the political side?
I think a lot about politics. It changes. I mean, with 16, I had more my utopian visions, a bit more naive maybe, but that's what we do when we're 16. And I think that the strength of literature is that that literature can show different aspects, and that it is slow. Literature answers to something after years. If you have the newspapers, they have to answer within one day. If you have theater, they have to answer within 3 months. And with literature, you really have time, and you can look at some context from one side and the other side, and then from another perspective. So that is what literature has, what other medias or arts don't have, or don't have to this extent. And I think that the combination of a story and getting very, very close to a person, to the protagonist or to different protagonists, is helping you to get empathy, and is helping you to let the different aspects get close to you in the combination of emotional and intellectual things that go together. And I think in this perspective, literature can have a long-lasting influence on our way we are thinking, and we're wondering, and we're asking questions. And it's not that literature will give an answer to the pandemic situation right now in December, and literature will tell you what to do on 24th of December. But literature can help you to be close to another person's mind, and that's, I think, a task that we really need.
Yes, in any situation, for example, the pandemic, if you return to the literature about other pandemics, you see that the world hasn't actually changed, and people are the same, and you learn so much, and you see that the history repeats after all, because people used to act the same way 100 years ago, and they do the same nowadays during this pandemic, and the same about our other topics. You mentioned that you are mentoring a young woman writer. For us here at Zabel International Women Writers Forum, it's very important to motivate young writers, young women writers. This is why we're talking to established writers who share their experiences and tell about their path. So my question is, what would you recommend to your younger self if you met her?
Well, to listen to other people, to try to understand the behavior and the decisions other people make. Read a lot, but my younger self would have read anyway, so it's not that important. Be curious, and maybe take a bit care of yourself. Don't force yourself all the time, but take some breaks.
Yes, that's interesting. We have talked about female and male writers, and why we have launched this forum is not to prove that these are equal, the male and female writers are on equal terms, but to prove that both are important to bring in the diversity, right? So, do you believe that there is literature for male and female readers? And how do you evaluate your own literature? Is it for female or male readers? Do you think about that when you write?
Well, actually, I hope that it's for all, but probably not for all, but not divided by sex or by gender. But I think that there are probably more women who like to read a special kind of literature, and there are some bestsellers, and when you ask somebody who knows like a bit of background why this has become a bestseller, then it's very often that this is a book also for male readers, so you can give it as a present, and so they sell even more. But probably when I look at the friends I have, the friends that write and read a lot probably read the same things. It's not about gender. But if I look at the friends I have that are not so much in the literary scene, men don't read that much. They don't read that much, at least not novels or poetry. So if I write a poetry, then I actually know it's, very little audience, and probably mostly a female audience. But I tried just to follow the interests I have, and I think that since I write about politics, it's something that is not really just an emotional cliche for a female audience that likes Bridget Jones or some other heartbreaking comedy. Although, I mean, I'm really impressed by those who can write those romances. I'm not able to do that, but it would not interest me as much as the work I do, actually.
Thank you very much, Nora. It was very nice to talk to you, and good luck to you and your future work. Thank you.
Thank you.